Afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to share insights with educators from other parts of the world, I would say, because some of you are not here in Argentina. Thank you very much, Felipe, for the invitation. Let's see. I would like to start by citing an author that I'm very fond of. I admire her a lot. She's an American expert on differentiated instruction that is called Carol Ann Tomlinson. Carol affirms that the students that come into our classrooms come from very different cultures, they have got different learning styles. They get to school, of course, with different levels of emotional and social maturity. They share diverse interests regarding their preferences for things that they want to study. And of course, this presents us teachers with multiple challenges, right? Something very difficult to face, she says. With this panorama, she believes that the most efficient teachers are those that manage to adapt their practices according to the students' levels of readiness, learning profiles, and interests. In this context, experts on gender and education, such as Abigail James, Michael Gurian, Leonard Sachs, among others, believe that sex offers us a great advantage as students enter our classroom already being boys and girls with their own innate biological disposition to have certain learning profiles and certain interests, right? And this, they believe, paves the way for teachers to adapt their practices to meet the students' needs, right? Before we start, I would like to share with you some questions that you don't need to answer. It's just for you to think about the answers on your own. But I'm sure that this will introduce us into what differentiated pedagogy is. Question number one, as something important, when I speak of gender, I will always be thinking of sex, right? We'll be talking about boys and girls, right? Question number one for you to think about. Have you ever separated your achievement data by gender? How does each gender performance compare in literacy, in maths, in science? Question number two. Have you ever separated your discipline data by gender? Which gender gets the most referrals by time and teacher? Question number three. Have you ever examined your students with learning difficulties to determine how gender is represented? Are there more girls with learning difficulties, more boys with learning difficulties? So, as I said before, this is just an introduction, something that will probably make you start thinking of what we'll be talking about. Having said that, I will pass on to the next slide. Going a little bit back to the past, we know that, well, at the very beginning of history, there were schools for boys, then there were schools for girls, then girls were introduced into the schools for boys, mainly for reasons that were basically social and political, right? To give women the same kind of opportunities that boys had, which was a mighty fact indeed, right? So in the past, that was something that was very good to do. However, the situation has changed a lot from the past until the present days. Almost everywhere, girls outperform boys at school, at university, and even in master's studies. In general terms, the most conflicted students seem to be boys, as research says, and so is the case with students diagnosed with learning difficulties. So this school, this co-educational school, which is graduated, it has a uniform curricula, is divided by age groups, was meant for teachers to use the exact, the same pedagogy with boys and with girls, right? The same didactics in the class. But apparently, according to experts on gender and education, this illusion of the one-size-fits-all school, a school in which boys and girls of the same age are exactly the same, has come to an end. By the 20th century, we and research and education in general began to focus on the actual students rather than on political or social claims regarding education, as we used to have in the past when, I don't know, girls claimed to get into the system. As I said before, something very good to happen because girls and boys should have the same opportunities. Should be able to choose the same professions, so their education should be very similar to all of them. But we have moved now from debating social rights and started looking at cognitive, biological, and socio-cultural differences between boys and girls, right? And this comes from research, from scientific, from technological studies that have demonstrated in the past years that there are innate differences between boys and girls. There are biological differences such as maturation rates, hormones. There are cognitive differences such as the fact that there is objective thinking, subjective thinking, deductive thinking versus inductive thinking. All this we will see a little bit later. And of course, there are also social, let's say, communication differences that have always existed. And those are barriers that I believe that we have already destroyed them, such as, I don't know, girls are not good at maths. I mean, there are certain things that in the last years we have broken, let's say, right? But there is this innate differences that do exist according to these authors on gender and education, right? So I would like to tell you my story, the reason why I started to study the differences between girls and boys in class. It happened to me that some years ago, I was working in a school for girls. I worked for a long time in a school for girls. And my lessons were, I don't know, adorable. My students were perfect. Everything was fine with them, our relationship. They learned a lot. We had a wonderful time. There came a moment when the owner of the school decided that she wanted to incorporate boys. Very intelligently, she placed the boys in a different building, a block away from the girls' school. Everything ran smoothly until the moment when the boys had finished primary school. They were about to enter secondary school, and the owner decided that she would make the classes co-ed. So I left the school in December, leaving an adorable group of girls to go back in March to face a group of boys and girls together in my class. And it happened to me that I always wondered, what am I doing in this situation? Am I delivering a class? Or am I actively teaching? Am I adapting my teaching strategies to what my students need, boys and girls? Let me tell you that I was not doing that, really. It was very hard for all of us teachers. We went into the staff room and we literally cried because we did not know how to handle the situation. And it took the school, I would say, almost 10 years to get adapted to this co-ed environment. What happened to me? Well, I now had this co-ed group of students in my class. I was teaching history at that moment. I went on doing the same things I had done, right? I gave them medium level challenges. I never thought that I had to add competition to my classes. There was a lot of dialogic teaching, dialogue all the time with the girls. My tone of voice was soft and calm, as it had always been. We had emotionally based relationships with the girls. I kept on doing that. And of course, with the boys, it did not work at all. Lessons were chaotic. So when I had the opportunity to do a licenciatura en lengua inglesa, and when the moment came for me to write my dissertation, I said, this is the topic that I have to investigate. I have to know what the matter was with this first group of co-ed students that I had in my class. Of course, at that moment, I was completely unaware that boys tend to retain objective information, dates, exact facts, while girls tend to remember more subjective information, anecdotes, background details, personal relationships. So the way in which I taught history through anecdotes, for example, no longer appealed or did not appeal the boys. The girls were very interested in, I don't know, the Queen marrying the King. It was British history at that time. The boys couldn't care less, right? Then I was not aware that boys tend to be deductive learners, while girls tend to be inductive learners. Boys will always tend to start from the whole to the parts. So I had to do more creative, more interpretative, more exploratory activities that, of course, I didn't do. While the girls who were more inductive, and we had always been very at ease in class, tended to start from details to the whole, right? They've got this different way of reasoning things out. I was completely unaware of the fact that boys and girls mature physically, well, physically, of course, all the girls were taller than the boys. That is something that we all know. But there was also psychological and cognitive brain maturation that was developing at different rates. This seems to be common sense because, of course, as a mummy, there were many things that I knew, but I had never ever thought of joining that to my lessons, right? So, well, these maturity rhythms made girls and boys approach differently whatever I gave to them to learn, while boys who were 12, 13 at that moment still behaved like children. The girls were much more mature, right? And sometimes this led to sexist attitudes or aggressive behavior. So again, it was something that I had to learn by force, let's say. Hormones. I had no idea that hormones influenced peer relationships and students' interaction among them and with me as a teacher. The high levels of oxytocin, which is the love chemical, and serotonin, which is the feel-good chemical in girls, made my girl students and I feel empathetic, feel comfortable sharing ideas, while the high levels of testosterone in my boy students made them be more aggressive, more self-confident, something that, of course, I was not willing to accept. I was not willing to accept aggression in class, right? By aggression, of course, I mean attitudes that are defiant, that are, I mean, common for boys. And I couldn't stand them having that attitude in class. I was completely unaware of movement in class. Of course, as I said before, I knew that boys tend to move more than girls do, but I had never associated that to teaching and learning, right? Boys could not still for a long period of time. They simply couldn't. And as Maria Calvo states, being quiet for a long time provoked frustration, impulsive behavior, distraction, right? It was something that it was, I don't know, an everyday challenge to me. Challenges and risks. Again, I wasn't aware that boys tend to be risk takers compared to girls who tend to be more cautious. Male competition is always a motivating factor that I never ever took into account. Emotions. I was completely unaware, again, of the existence of the male anger button, as Leonard Sachs calls it, and the more indirect or pink form of aggression. Boys in class who, I don't know, all of a sudden, as I said before, were aggressive or responded physically. It was something normal to them. And girls who were using this pink form of aggression, which is verbal and which sometimes can even be more aggressive than physical aggression, right? But all that happened in my class, and I had never ever experienced it. Then differences in vision, hearing, temperature, sensibility. Girls tended to discriminate objects all the time much easier than boys. Boys were able to locate objects, to see objects in movement. Girls tended to be more sensible to noise, whereas boys tend to be more tolerant. So the noise in class, the shouting in class, by shouting, I don't mean anything, let's say, anything bad. I mean, I mean a low tone of voice on the part of the boys was something that, well, for them it was normal, and for me it was, I don't know, it created really something very uncomfortable. Temperature. I had never thought that cold classrooms could make the girls feel less comfortable and more prone to distractions. Girls usually tend to be colder than boys. They feel cold more than boys do. And of course, all that in class is something that influences the teaching learning practice. The tone of voice, as I said before, I used a soft, calm tone of voice, and I noticed that my voice could not care less about that. I had to use a blunt tone of noise, short phrases for them to pay attention to what we were doing in class. Cooperative versus individual work. Of course, there are differences between the ways in which the girls and boys wanted to approach learning. Again, hormones, oxytocin, serotonin, make girls feel more at ease when working in groups, when working cooperatively. They are fond of helping others. Whereas boys preferred individual work, competitive group work. All that happened in my class, and I had to learn it all of a sudden. This feminine insecurity versus the masculine reality check. Girls tend to be more insecure about their capacities. We should help them to recognize their assets, accept their personal weaknesses, whereas boys, on the contrary, they need a reality check with authority, with discipline, with the teacher having an imperative behavior. If teachers do not provide this through adequate didactics, boys will find this personally outside, right? And here, something that I also learned later on, the teacher plays an important role because boys are very respectful of hierarchical structures. The teacher should be at the top of the hierarchy, right? How? By knowing a lot about the subject, by preparing her lessons or his lessons very well, by setting high expectations in boys. Context. I had no idea that, well, girls, of course, as I said before, they were very happy with the context of history. Boys could not care less. They felt bored when I started talking a lot about certain historical moments, right? They wanted objective facts, simple facts. So that is another thing that I learned during the process. And then there was this concept of the nothing box, which of course I learned much later when I started studying. The nothing box or the zero sum. What happens, according to authors, neurologists, is that boys tend to have a resting zone in the brain. When a boy gets very tired, he gets isolated of what happens around. They need that moment of silence, of thinking about nothing. And that drove me crazy. He said, no, impossible. You have to be paying attention all the time. So his suggestions for teachers who teach boys is move a lot in class, make a lot of gestures, use pictures, drawings, schemes of work that make boys call their attention towards work all the time. So, of course, what was happening to me was that there was a mismatch in my lessons, right? The standardized pedagogy that I had learned at the Teachers Training College and that I had put into practice for certain years, facing the distinct biological needs of my students, did not coincide, right? So there was a mismatch that, of course, was not profitable at all for my students, right? So this is something again that I learned. I had to learn all of a sudden. This mismatch produced, of course, decreased academic performance, increased dissatisfaction towards learning, school stress, as Joyce points out, school stress for the teacher and school stress for the boys as well, and for the girls too, because they were all together in the same boat. So to make a kind of a summary, I tried to think of certain educational variables and see how is it that these biological and cognitive variables affect what happens in class, right? Through the techniques that we use. Diagnostic comparison matrix, there is a spelling mistake there. So one educational variable is communication style. Of course, we know that girls tend to be highly verbal, whereas boys tend to be non-verbal. They need short imperative phrases. Of course, we are always generalizing based on relevant research, right? There are always exceptions to the rules. There are brains that are very masculine, there are brains that are very feminine, and in between there are brains that tend to be more masculine than others and more feminine than others, right? So this is, of course, always speaking about general terms. Regarding learning motivation of our students, girls tend to be more cooperative, they are context dependent, they are relationship driven, whereas boys tend to be competitive, challenge driven, right? They need that all the time in class. Regarding the environment, the classroom, the girls tend to be sensitive to context, sight, hearing, temperature, colors. Girls need classrooms in which there are lots of posters, lots of images, lots of colors. Boys, on the contrary, prefer austere classes, a more orderly structure. Regarding logic and emotion, girls are more prone to female insecurity, to feel insecure. That's why teachers need to support them a lot. We also need to make them understand that they can be very good leaders, because at a moment, especially during adolescence, in which they have doubts regarding this. And boys, on the contrary, need a kind of reality check, right? Which is responsive to confrontation and challenges. As regards processing, um, girls will be always more comfortable with subjective tests, with tests in which they have to develop answers because of their inductive reasoning. They will be more comfortable working in teams, working in groups, whereas boys, on the contrary, will always prefer individual tasks. All their maturation rates and hormonal impacts makes them feel much happier and much more comfortable when they have to work individually and challenging themselves, right, as opposed to girls. And then, well, just to be closing, how important it is to achieve this goodness of fit that Margaret Ferrara calls. She says that this goodness of fit, this matching of learning styles and teaching styles should occur for our lessons to be successful. And she says that this goodness of fit occurs when the teaching style is actively harmonized with students' biological and cognitive learning styles. And of course, this creates a classroom environment that is friendly and highly effective for both boys and girls, whether in single sex or co-educational environment. It does not matter where we are teaching. We should always aim at getting this goodness of fit theory put into practice. Just to summarize, some differentiated activities and tasks with which girls would feel more comfortable. All the activities or all the strategies that mean intrapersonal relationships, auditory, verbal activities, those that imply feelings and emotions, singing, literature, cooperative work, dramatizing, group work. Whereas boys will tend to be happier or more comfortable with activities that are more visual, more kinesthetic, when there is movement, when they have to deal with facts, with stressing activities that stress moves them into wanting to know more. Decontextualized activities, as I said before, the context bores them. Competitive games, mechanical exercises, problem-solving activities. And, oops. And just for you to have some references about authors who deal with this matter, there are lots. These are the ones I'm very fond of. Leonard Sachs, Michael Gurian, Abigail James, David Chatwell, Cornelius Riordan, Maria Calvo-Charro, Caroline Tomlinson, Simon Baron Cohen. These are some of the authors that, I don't know, taught me lots of things regarding differentiated pedagogy, and I highly recommend them. And that's it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Gabriela. This has been a really insightful presentation. If you want to stop sharing your
Here I
PowerPoint, thank
am.
you. Thank you very much. Maybe we can have a little conversation now, although we have 3 minutes or even less.
I'm sorry.
So no. I didn't want to
Women
interrupt
are
because,
verbal.
sorry?
We women are more verbal than you are. So
Yeah, I get that idea out of the presentation. But also maybe you can share your email if somebody wants to contact you directly through the
of
chat,
course,
or I can also share it if you allow me,
of
Gabriela.
course, no problem
And
at all.
also I can share also the PowerPoint. So maybe one
Yes,
question, although we have only some minutes left, but or a question would be if you had experienced this in your classrooms or maybe in your family, because I think this is also
yeah.
common if you
Mhm.
have boys and girls.
Mhm. Yeah, sorry, but that all this is common sense, as I said before. The thing is that sometimes when we get into the classroom, it is not that easy to break our own thoughts, to put into practice. I mean, we tend to put into practice everything that we have studied and that what we have been taught at the Teachers Training College. And this is something that, I mean, differences between boys and girls and research on gender and education is something that is quite new. But as I said before, it's common sense that we tend to disregard, but it is so valuable when we teach boys and girls, either in co-ed environments or in single-sex environments. It's the same.
Yeah, I don't know if in Guatemala, Las Charcas, did you have this experience or
Hello, everybody. Hi. Well,
no?
we teach, we are preschool teachers here. Okay. So we, on our preschool, we have boys and girls, but when they get to the other, to bigger schools, to elementary, that's when girls go to one school. They go separately, yeah, to elementary. So the question some parents ask us is, how do they learn their social skills? Like, will girls get along with boys when they grow up? That's the kind of questions we usually get, the social part. So
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what experts say. I'm just referring to authors that I have studied. They say that, much on the contrary, being able to be themselves in class, as I said before, either in a co-ed or in a single-sex classroom, being able to learn to be themselves prepares them for socializing in a better way when they have to, right? When they have to face, when boys have to face girls or vice versa. Um, Having been able to develop all their talents as boys and as girls faces them for better relationships with the opposite sex.
Okay, so thank you very much. I would love to continue the conversation, but we have to finish. I've shared with you the email of Gabriela if you want to
Okay.
contact her directly. And also, I will upload this session online if you want to share it with your colleagues, okay, in YouTube. So thank you very much, Gabriela, and
Thanks to
thank you all
you,
of you for
Felipe.
participating.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.